"Women don't belong behind a scope," he said, until she silenced 12 targets in combat. Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and gossiped about boys, she spent weekends at her grandfather's ranch, learning to shoot tin cans off fence posts with his old hunting rifle. Her steady hands and sharp eyes caught the attention of everyone who watched her shoot, but not always in a good way. The local shooting range was dominated by men who gathered every Saturday morning to compare their latest purchases and brag about their accuracy scores. When 18-year-old Sarah first walked through those doors, conversation stopped mid-sentence. She wore simple jeans and a baseball cap, carrying a basic rifle that looked ancient compared to the expensive equipment surrounding her. "You lost, sweetheart?" asked Jake Morrison, a burly man in his 40s who considered himself the unofficial leader of the group. His friends chuckled as Sarah approached the counter to pay for range time. The clerk, an elderly man named Pete, had known Sarah's grandfather for decades and simply nodded, handing her safety glasses and ear protection without question. Sarah walked to the furthest lane, away from the group of men who were now openly staring and whispering among themselves. She set up her targets at varying distances, starting with the standard 25 yards. Her first shot hit dead center. The second shot split the first bullet hole. By the fifth shot, she had created a single ragged hole in the bullseye. Tuck-you. Range fell silent except for the ventilation system humming overhead. Even Jake had stopped talking, watching this young woman destroy targets with mechanical precision. Sarah calmly moved her target back to 50 yards, then 75, then 100. Each distance brought the same result: perfect groupings that would make professional marksmen jealous. "Lucky shots," Jake muttered loud enough for Sarah to hear. His pride was wounded by being outshot by someone he considered an amateur, especially a woman. Anyone can hit a paper target when there's no pressure. Sarah removed her ear protection and turned to face the group. "What kind of pressure are you talking about?" she asked quietly, her voice steady and confident. "Real shooting," Jake replied, crossing his arms. "Competition, stakes that matter. Paper targets don't shoot back." His friends nodded in agreement, though several looked uncomfortable with the increasingly hostile tone. "I'd be interested in any competition you have in mind," Sarah responded, her calm demeanor never wavering. This only seemed to irritate Jake more. "Women don't belong behind a scope," he declared, his voice rising. "This isn't some hobby for little girls playing dress-up. Real shooting requires strength, nerves, and mental toughness that—" He paused, looking her up and down dismissively, "that most women just don't have." The other men shifted uncomfortably. Even those who agreed with Jake's sentiment recognized he had crossed a line with his tone and words. Pete, the range clerk, frowned from behind the counter but said nothing. Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but she kept her voice level. "I see. And what would it take to prove otherwise?" Jake smiled, thinking he had found an easy way to embarrass this overconfident young woman. "There's a military precision shooting competition next month. Real marksmen, real pressure, real stakes. Entry fee is $500, and it's not the kind of event where they give participation trophies." "Will you be competing?" Sarah asked. "I've won it 3 years running," Jake boasted, his chest puffing with pride. "Been shooting since before you were born." Sarah walked back to her shooting station and began packing her equipment. The men watched, expecting her to make excuses and leave in defeat. Instead, she turned back to Jake with a slight smile. "I'll see you there," she said simply, slinging her rifle case over her shoulder. "And Jake? You might want to start practicing." As Sarah walked toward the exit, Jake's laughter followed her. "Don't embarrass yourself, little girl. This isn't some county fair carnival game. These competitions separate the real shooters from the pretenders." The door closed behind Sarah with a soft thud, leaving the group of men to discuss what had just happened. Some laughed nervously, others shook their heads in disapproval of Jake's behavior, and a few wondered if they had just witnessed something significant. Over the next few weeks, word spread through the local shooting community about the confrontation at the range. Most people sided with Jake, agreeing that the military precision competition was no place for an inexperienced young woman. The event was known for its grueling conditions, complex shooting scenarios, and the high level of skill required just to avoid last place. Sarah's grandfather, however, had a different reaction when she told him about the competition. Miguel Martinez was a Korean War veteran who had taught his granddaughter everything she knew about shooting. He had always been proud of her natural ability, but he also understood the challenges she would face in a male-dominated field. "Mija," he said in his gentle voice, using the Spanish term of endearment he had called her since childhood, "are you sure this is the battle you want to fight? There will be others." Sarah looked at her grandfather, the man who had shown her that precision and respect for firearms went hand in hand. "Abuelo, you always taught me that backing down from bullies only makes them stronger. Besides, someone needs to show Jake Morrison that his attitude is outdated." Miguel smiled, recognizing his own stubbornness reflected in his granddaughter's determination. "Then we have work to do. This competition won't be like shooting at the range. You'll need to be ready for anything." The next morning, Sarah's real training began. Her grandfather contacted old military friends, researched the competition format, and designed a training regimen that would push Sarah's skills to their absolute limits. What Jake Morrison didn't know was that he had just challenged someone who was about to discover capabilities she never knew she possessed. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change not only Sarah's life, but challenge the assumptions of an entire community about what women could achieve behind a rifle scope. The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 in the morning, just as it had every day for the past 3 weeks. Sarah rolled out of bed, her muscles already aching from the previous day's training. Her grandfather believed in starting before dawn, when the mind was clearest and distractions were minimal. Miguel Martinez stood waiting by his old pickup truck, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. At 78, he moved with the precise, economical motions of a man who had learned to waste nothing. Not time, not energy, not ammunition. His weathered hands still held the steady grip that had made him one of the finest marksmen in his army unit during the Korean War. "Today we work on breathing under stress," he announced as Sarah approached. "Jake Morrison and his friends think shooting is about having the biggest rifle and the loudest mouth. They're wrong. Real shooting is about controlling your body when everything around you is chaos." They drove to a remote section of the ranch where Miguel had set up an elaborate training course. Unlike the static targets Sarah was used to, this course featured moving targets, obstacles, and scenarios designed to simulate real-world shooting conditions. Her grandfather had spent days constructing pop-up targets that appeared at random intervals, forcing Sarah to acquire, aim, and fire within seconds. "In combat, targets don't wait for you to get comfortable," Miguel explained as he demonstrated the course. "They move, they hide, they shoot back. This competition you're entering, it's designed by military people who understand real shooting. Jake Morrison thinks it's like the local turkey shoots he's been winning. He's about to learn otherwise." Sarah's first attempt at the course was humbling. Targets popped up behind her while she was focused forward. Others appeared for only 3 seconds before disappearing. The obstacles forced her to shoot from uncomfortable positions, lying on her stomach, crouched behind barriers, even hanging upside down from a rope her grandfather had rigged between 2 trees. "Your breathing is all wrong," Miguel observed, after Sarah missed her 4th target in a row. "You're holding your breath like you do on the range, but when your heart is pounding from running between stations, holding your breath just makes you dizzy." He taught her the rhythm used by military snipers, a controlled breathing pattern that worked even when adrenaline flooded her system. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 2, breathe out for 6, hold for 2. Fire during the natural pause. Your body will find its calm center even when everything else is moving. The physical conditioning was just as important as the shooting itself. Sarah ran 3 miles every morning, then spent an hour on exercises designed to strengthen her core and improve her stability. Miguel had researched the competition format and learned that contestants would be required to carry their equipment over rough terrain, often while racing against time limits. Jake Morrison drives to his shooting spot and sets up at a bench. "Rest," Miguel noted with disgust. Real marksmen carry everything they need and can shoot accurately from any position. That's the difference between a range shooter and a warrior. As Sarah's skills improved, Miguel began adding psychological pressure to the training. He would shout commands, fire blanks nearby to simulate distraction, and even play recordings of combat sounds through portable speakers. The goal was to make her comfortable with chaos, to find her center of calm no matter what happened around her. Your mind is your most important weapon, he explained during one particularly intense session. Jake Morrison will try to intimidate you. Other competitors will underestimate you. Officials might be biased against you. None of that matters if you can control your thoughts and focus on the fundamentals. The local shooting community watched Sarah's preparations with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Some admired her dedication, but most expected her to withdraw from the competition as the date approached. Word had spread about the rigorous training regime, and several people had tried to convince her that she was in over her head. That girl is going to embarrass herself and every woman who shoots, complained Martha Henderson, one of the few female members at the local gun club. She should stick to ladies' trap shooting and leave the serious competitions to men. Even some of Sarah's friends from high school couldn't understand her determination. "Why do you care what Jake Morrison thinks?" asked her best friend Lisa during one of their increasingly rare phone conversations. "You're going to college next year. Just ignore him and move on." But Sarah couldn't ignore the challenge, and it wasn't just about Jake Morrison anymore. Every day of training revealed new capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. Her grandfather's teaching methods were unlocking skills that went far beyond hitting targets on a shooting range. "You have a gift, Mija," Miguel told her one evening as they cleaned their rifles together. "But gifts mean nothing without discipline and purpose. What you're learning now, the mental control, the physical conditioning, the ability to perform under pressure, these skills will serve you long after this competition is over." As the weeks passed, Sarah began to understand what her grandfather meant. The training was changing her in fundamental ways. She walked with more confidence, spoke with quiet authority, and found herself unshakable in situations that once would have flustered her. The shy, uncertain girl who had first walked into the shooting range was being forged into something much stronger. The competition was now only 2 weeks away, and Sarah's preparation entered its final phase. Miguel had arranged for her to train with some of his old military contacts, men who had competed in similar events and understood the specific challenges she would face. "Remember," Miguel said as they finished another dawn training session, "Jake Morrison has spent his whole life being the biggest fish in a small pond. He's never faced real competition from someone with your natural ability and proper training. His arrogance will be his weakness. Your humility and preparation will be your strength." Sarah nodded, checking her rifle one final time before they headed back to the house. She was no longer the same person who had been dismissed and insulted. At the shooting range, the training had revealed a warrior's heart beneath her quiet exterior, and she was ready to prove that determination and skill mattered more than prejudice and loud boasting. The competition would test everything she had learned, but Sarah Martinez was no longer afraid of the challenge. She was eager for it. The military training facility was nothing like the comfortable shooting ranges Sarah was used to. Located on 300 acres of rugged terrain, it featured everything from dense forest to open desert, steep hills to muddy ravines. The course had been designed by former Special Forces personnel to test every aspect of a marksman's abilities under the most challenging conditions possible. Sarah arrived at dawn with her grandfather, who would serve as her spotter and equipment assistant. Other competitors were already setting up in the staging area, mostly men between 30 and 50, many wearing military-style clothing covered with patches from various shooting competitions and tactical training courses. Their equipment cases looked expensive and professional, filled with custom rifles, high-end optics, and accessories Sarah had only seen in magazines. "Look at little Annie Oakley," someone whispered as Sarah walked past carrying her grandfather's old rifle case. Several competitors turned to stare, their expressions ranging from amused to incredulous. Word had spread through the shooting community about the teenage girl who had dared to enter one of the region's most challenging competitions. Jake Morrison stood near the registration table, surrounded by his usual group of admirers from the local shooting range. He wore a black tactical vest covered with patches and badges, looking like he was ready for combat rather than a shooting competition. When he spotted Sarah, his face broke into a condescending grin. "Well, well," he called, out loud enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't think you'd actually show up. Still time to save yourself the embarrassment and go home." Sarah ignored him completely, focusing on the registration process. The entry officials seemed surprised by her age and gender but processed her paperwork without comment. She was assigned competitor number 47 out of 62 total participants. The course briefing took place in a large tent where competitors gathered to hear the rules and format. The competition consisted of 12 different shooting stations spread across the facility's terrain. Each station presented unique challenges designed to test specific skills under time pressure. Station 1 is precision shooting at known distances from 200 to 800 meters, announced Colonel James Mitchell, the retired Special Forces officer who designed the course. Station 2 requires rapid target acquisition while moving through an obstacle course. Station 3 tests your ability to shoot accurately after physical exertion. As Colonel Mitchell continued describing each station, Sarah realized her grandfather's training had prepared her for exactly these challenges. While other competitors took notes frantically, she listened calmly, visualizing each scenario and planning her approach. "Station 7 is our sniper challenge," the colonel continued. "Camouflaged targets at unknown distances between 400 and 1,000 meters. You'll have 30 minutes to locate and engage 12 targets using only your optics. Miss more than 2 targets and you're eliminated from the competition." Jake Morrison leaned over to his friend and said loudly, "That's where the little girl washes out. Takes real experience to spot hidden targets at long range." Sarah felt her grandfather's hand gently touch her shoulder, a reminder to stay focused and ignore the distractions. She had learned to use other people's underestimation as an advantage, rather than allowing it to affect her performance. The competition began with competitors starting at different stations in small groups. Sarah was assigned to begin at Station 4, which required shooting from awkward positions while wearing full gear. She strapped on her equipment pack, weighing 40 pounds as required, and approached the course. The first position required shooting while lying on her back, holding the rifle upside down to engage targets above her. Most competitors struggled with this unusual angle, but Sarah's training with her grandfather had included dozens of unconventional shooting positions. She quickly acquired all 5 targets, hitting each one center mass. The second position was even more challenging, shooting while hanging from a rope using only one hand to steady the rifle. Sarah's months of physical conditioning paid off as she maintained stability and fired accurately despite the swaying motion. The range officials exchanged glances of surprise as they marked her scorecard. As the morning progressed, Sarah moved through different stations with methodical precision. At Station 2, she navigated the obstacle course faster than men twice her size, her lightweight build and superior conditioning giving her a significant advantage. At Station 5, which tested rapid-fire accuracy under time pressure, her breathing control allowed her to maintain precision even as other competitors rushed their shots and missed targets. By noon, word was spreading among the officials and observers that the young woman was posting scores that rivaled the top competitors. Jake Morrison, who had been boasting about his performance at earlier stations, began asking pointed questions about Sarah's scores. "Must be beginner's luck," he told anyone who would listen. "Wait until she hits the real challenges, that's when experience matters." The afternoon brought the most difficult stations, including the dreaded Station 7, the sniper challenge that eliminated more competitors than any other. Sarah approached the station with quiet confidence, her grandfather carrying her, spotting equipment as they surveyed the terrain ahead. The course stretched across a valley filled with natural vegetation, rock outcroppings, and artificial camouflage. 12 targets were hidden somewhere in that landscape, each no larger than a dinner plate and designed to blend perfectly with the background. Competitors had to locate each target through their rifle scope, then engage it accurately enough to register a hit. Sarah sat up in the prone position, adjusting her rifle's bipod and settling into her shooting stance. Through her scope, the valley looked like an impenetrable maze of shadows, vegetation, and rocky surfaces. She began the methodical process her grandfather had taught her, scanning systematically from left to right, looking for anything that didn't belong in the natural pattern. The first target took her 3 minutes to locate, a small steel plate painted to look like tree bark, positioned behind actual fallen logs 400 meters away. Her first shot rang the target with a clear metallic sound confirming the hit. 1 down, 11 to go. As Sarah worked through the course, other competitors at nearby stations stopped to watch. Even the officials seemed impressed by her systematic approach and consistent accuracy. She located targets that some competitors never found, engaging them at distances that tested the limits of her equipment. Jake Morrison arrived at Station 7 just as Sarah was engaging her 10th target at nearly 800 meters. He set up nearby, expecting to demonstrate his superior experience and skill. Instead, he watched in growing frustration as Sarah calmly located and engaged targets he couldn't even see through his expensive optics. 28 minutes, announced the range officer as Sarah fired her final shot. 12 targets, 12 hits, perfect score. The congratulations from officials and spectators were immediate and genuine. Even competitors who had initially dismissed Sarah now approached to offer respect for her performance. But Jake Morrison stood silently, his face red with embarrassment and anger. As Sarah packed her equipment, she could hear Jake arguing with the range officers, claiming there must have been some mistake in the scoring. His protests fell on deaf ears. The electronic target system recorded every hit with perfect accuracy. The competition's final standings would be announced that evening, but everyone already knew that an 18-year-old girl from rural Texas had just delivered one of the most dominant performances in the event's history. More importantly, she had done it with grace, humility, and a level of skill that commanded respect from even her harshest critics. Everyone, that is, except Jake Morrison, who was about to learn that his troubles with Sarah Martinez were just beginning. The award ceremony took place that evening in the facility's main building, with competitors and spectators gathered around tables, displaying the various trophies and prizes. Sarah sat quietly with her grandfather, still processing the day's events. She had completed all 12 stations with scores that exceeded her own expectations, but the final results wouldn't be announced until Colonel Mitchell finished tabulating the complex scoring system. Jake Morrison sat across the room with his supporters, his earlier confidence replaced by obvious anxiety. He had performed well at most stations, but struggled significantly with the more technical challenges, particularly the precision shooting at extreme distances. His loud boasting from earlier in the day now seemed embarrassing, and several people who had previously supported him were keeping their distance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Mitchell announced, stepping to the front of the room with a folder containing the final results. "This year's competition was one of the most challenging we've ever conducted, with several new elements designed to test every aspect of marksmanship skill." He paused to scan the room, his eyes stopping briefly on Sarah before continuing. "Before I announce the winners, I want to acknowledge that this competition attracted participants from across the Southwest, including several former military marksmen, law enforcement officers, and previous champions. The level of skill demonstrated today was exceptional." Sarah felt her grandfather's reassuring hand on her shoulder as Colonel Mitchell opened his folder. Despite her strong performance throughout the day, she couldn't shake the feeling that somehow the results might not reflect what she had accomplished. In third place, with a total score of 847 points, Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, retired Army Special Forces. Applause filled the room as a distinguished-looking Asian man in his 40s stepped forward to accept his trophy. Sarah recognized him as one of the competitors who had been consistently accurate throughout the day. In second place, with a total score of 891 points, Detective Marcus Williams, Dallas Police Department SWAT team. More applause as a tall black man approached the trophy table. Sarah had watched him shoot at several stations and knew he was extremely skilled. If he had finished second with 891 points, the winner must have posted an incredible score. Colonel Mitchell looked directly at Sarah before speaking again. "And in first place, with a competition record score of 967 points out of a possible 1,000, Miss Sarah Martinez." The room erupted in genuine applause, though Sarah could see Jake Morrison sitting rigid in his chair, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. She walked to the front of the room in a daze, still not quite believing what she had heard. "Miss Martinez," Colonel Mitchell said as he handed her the first-place trophy. "Not only did you win this competition, but you set a new facility record. Your performance today was remarkable, particularly considering this was your first major competition." As Sarah accepted the trophy, a beautiful crystal and metal sculpture depicting a marksman in shooting position, Colonel Mitchell continued speaking to the audience. "I've been involved in competitive shooting for over 30 years, and I can honestly say I've rarely seen such a combination of technical skill, mental composure, and tactical awareness in someone so young. Miss Martinez demonstrated that true marksmanship transcends gender, age, or experience level." The applause continued as Sarah returned to her seat, but she could feel the tension radiating from Jake Morrison's direction. His friends were trying to console him, but his humiliation was complete and very public. As the ceremony concluded and people began to leave, several competitors approached Sarah to offer congratulations and ask about her training methods. Even some who had initially been skeptical were now genuinely impressed and curious about her background. "That was some serious shooting," said Detective Williams, the second-place finisher. "Where did you learn to read terrain like that? Your target acquisition at Station 7 was better than most snipers I've worked with." Sarah was explaining her grandfather's training methods when Jake Morrison suddenly appeared beside their group. His face was flushed and his voice carried a bitter edge that made everyone uncomfortable. "Must be nice having such an easy course," he said loudly. "Guess they dumbed it down for the kids this year." The group fell silent, and Colonel Mitchell, who had been talking to other officials nearby, immediately walked over. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Morrison?" Jake's friends tried to pull him away, but he was too angry to think clearly. "I've been shooting competitively for 15 years, he declared. "There's no way some teenage girl outshot me fair and square. Something's not right about this whole thing." Colonel Mitchell's expression hardened. As a career military officer, he had zero tolerance for poor sportsmanship or implications that his competition was conducted unfairly. "Mr. Morrison, every shot in this competition was electronically monitored and recorded. Miss Martinez's performance was witnessed by multiple officials at every station. Are you questioning the integrity of this event?" "I'm saying that women don't belong in competitions like this," Jake replied, his voice rising. "This isn't some game. Real shooting requires exactly what Miss Martinez demonstrated today," Colonel Mitchell interrupted. "Precision, composure, adaptability, and mental toughness. She outperformed every man in this competition, including you." The confrontation was attracting attention from across the room. Other competitors and officials gathered around, creating an uncomfortable circle with Jake at the center. Sarah tried to step away, not wanting to escalate the situation, but Jake turned his anger directly toward her. "You think you're some kind of hotshot now?" he snarled. "This was a fluke. One lucky day doesn't make you a real marksman." Miguel Martinez had been silent throughout the exchange, but now he stepped forward. At 78, he was smaller than Jake Morrison, but his presence commanded immediate attention. "Young man," he said quietly, "my granddaughter earned her victory today through months of preparation and years of training. She showed respect for the competition, the officials, and her fellow competitors. You are showing none of those things." Jake started to respond, but Miguel continued speaking. "More importantly, she has proven that skill and dedication matter more than prejudice and loud talking. Perhaps you should spend less time making excuses and more time improving your shooting." The rebuke, delivered with calm dignity, seemed to deflate Jake's anger. He looked around the room and realized that everyone, competitors, officials, and spectators, was staring at him with expressions ranging from embarrassment to disgust. Colonel Mitchell stepped forward again. "Mr. Morrison, I think it would be best if you left now. Miss Martinez earned her victory fairly, and she deserves to enjoy this moment without listening to unfounded accusations." As Jake was escorted from the building by his embarrassed friends, Sarah finally allowed herself to fully appreciate what had happened. She hadn't just won a shooting competition. She had proven a point that went far beyond marksmanship. Later that evening, as she and her grandfather drove home through the Texas darkness, Sarah reflected on the day's events. The trophy sat, in her lap, catching occasional glints of light from passing cars. "Abuelo," she said softly, "do you think this changes anything? I mean, really changes anything?" Miguel smiled, his weathered hands steady on the steering wheel. "Mija, you didn't just beat Jake Morrison today. You beat an attitude, a prejudice, an assumption about what women can accomplish. Some people will never change their minds, but others saw something today that they'll never forget." As they pulled into their driveway, Sarah realized her grandfather was right. The victory had been about more than just hitting targets and winning trophies. It had been about proving that determination, skill, and proper training could overcome any obstacle, including the narrow-minded beliefs of people who thought they knew what she was capable of. But neither Sarah nor her grandfather could have predicted how much this single day would change the trajectory of her entire life. 3 weeks after the competition, Sarah was working in her grandfather's workshop when the phone rang. Miguel answered with his usual gruff greeting, but his expression quickly changed to one of surprise and attention. He listened carefully, for several minutes, asking few questions but taking detailed notes on a scrap of paper. "Sarah," he called after hanging up, "that was Colonel Mitchell from the competition. He wants to speak with you about something important." The colonel had been contacted by Army Recruiting Command after her competition performance made its way up through military channels. Word had spread quickly through the Special Forces community about the 18-year-old civilian who had broken their facility record, and several high-ranking officers wanted to meet her personally. "They're offering you something called the Special Forces Scholarship Program," Miguel explained, reading from his notes. "Full college tuition, specialized training during summers, and guaranteed consideration for advanced military schools after graduation." Sarah felt her world shift. She had planned to attend the local community college and maybe transfer to a 4-year school eventually, but money had always been a concern. This opportunity would change everything, not just financially, but in terms of the doors it might open. 2 days later, Colonel Mitchell arrived at their ranch accompanied by Master Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, a career Special Forces soldier who specialized in recruiting exceptional candidates for specialized programs. Sarah was surprised to see a woman in such a position, and Master Sergeant Rodriguez seemed to read her thoughts. "I know what you're thinking," Rodriguez said with a slight smile. "Women aren't supposed to be in Special Forces, right? That changed recently, and the Army is looking for qualified female candidates who can meet our standards. Your competition performance suggests you might be one of them." They spent 2 hours discussing the scholarship program, military career opportunities, and the specific training Sarah would receive. The program would pay for her college education while providing intensive military training during summers and winter breaks. Upon graduation, she would be commissioned as an officer and given opportunities to attend some of the most elite military schools in the world. "What makes this particularly interesting," Colonel Mitchell explained, "is that your civilian training background gives you a different perspective from traditional military marksmen. We're always looking for people who can think outside conventional frameworks." Master Sergeant Rodriguez was more direct. "Sarah, I've reviewed the video footage from your competition performance. Your target acquisition speed, accuracy under pressure, and tactical awareness are exceptional. With proper military training, you could become one of the finest precision marksmen in the Army." The decision wasn't easy. Sarah had always planned to stay close to home, help run the ranch, and maybe teach school eventually. The military represented a complete departure from everything she had envisioned for her future. But the opportunity was unprecedented, and both she and her grandfather recognized it might never come again. "What would the training involve?" Sarah asked. "Initially, standard military training to get you familiar with military customs and procedures," Rodriguez explained. "But then you'd attend specialized schools, advanced marksmanship, sniper school, possibly urban warfare training. You'd work with some of the best instructors in the world." Miguel had been quiet throughout the discussion, but now he leaned forward. "And after her training, what would she actually do in the Army?" Colonel Mitchell and Master Sergeant Rodriguez exchanged glances before Rodriguez answered. "That would depend on her performance and preferences, but candidates with her skill, level typically end up in specialized units, intelligence gathering, precision elimination of high-value targets, protection of critical personnel or facilities. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from living conditions to career advancement opportunities. As the military officers prepared to leave, they gave Sarah a week to make her decision. That evening, Sarah and her grandfather sat on the ranch's front porch, watching the sun set over the Texas landscape. The decision weighed heavily on both of them, representing not just a career choice but a fundamental change in Sarah's life direction. "What do you think, abuelo?" she asked quietly. Miguel was silent for a long time before responding. "When I was in Korea, I served with men who had gifts, natural abilities that went far beyond normal soldiers. Most of them never got the chance to fully develop those gifts because the military wasn't set up to recognize and nurture special talents." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But times have changed. These people aren't offering you just a job. They're offering you the chance to become something extraordinary. The question is whether you want that kind of life." Sarah considered his words carefully. The past few months had already shown her capabilities she didn't know she possessed. The competition had proven that she could perform at the highest levels, under intense pressure. But military service would mean years away from home, dangerous assignments, and a lifestyle completely different from anything she had experienced. "I keep thinking about Jake Morrison," she said finally. "Not because I care what he thinks, but because of what he represents. How many other people out there believe women can't do certain jobs, can't handle certain responsibilities?" Miguel smiled, recognizing his own sense of justice in his granddaughter's words. "So this is about more than just your career? Maybe. If I can succeed in something like special forces, maybe it opens doors for other women. Maybe it changes some minds." The next morning, Sarah called Colonel Mitchell and accepted the scholarship offer. Within 6 weeks, she was enrolled at Texas A&M University as a criminal justice major, with her first summer training session scheduled at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Her departure from the ranch was emotional, but filled with excitement about the unknown challenges ahead. Miguel drove her to the airport, carrying himself with the same quiet pride he had shown throughout her competition training. "Remember," he said as they waited for her boarding call, "the fundamentals never change. Breathing, sight alignment, trigger control, and mental discipline. Everything else is just details." As Sarah boarded the plane for her first step toward a military career, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that confrontational day at the shooting range. Jake Morrison's dismissive attitude had inadvertently launched her toward opportunities she never could have imagined. But the real challenges were just beginning. Military training would test not just her shooting skills, but every aspect of her character, determination, and ability to adapt. The question wasn't whether she could shoot accurately. The competition had proven that beyond doubt. The question was whether she had the mental toughness to succeed in an environment where failure could mean life or death, not just for herself, but for the people depending on her skills. As the plane lifted off from Texas soil, Sarah Martinez began the transformation from exceptional civilian marksman to what would eventually become one of the most skilled military snipers of her generation. The young woman who had been told she didn't belong behind a scope was about to prove that expertise and determination could overcome any prejudice or obstacle. The journey from that small-town shooting range to military excellence was just beginning, and Sarah was ready for whatever came next. 4 years later, Staff Sergeant Sarah Martinez crouched in the shadow of a crumbling building in Afghanistan, her rifle steady despite the chaos erupting around her position. The young woman who had once been dismissed at a Texas shooting range was now the lead sniper for an elite special operations team, with a reputation that had spread throughout the military community. Her spotter, Sergeant First Class David Chen, pressed against the wall beside her as mortar rounds exploded in the distance. Their mission was supposed to have been routine: provide overwatch for a convoy moving through a supposedly secure area. Instead, they had walked into a carefully planned ambush that threatened to overwhelm the entire patrol. "Contact left. 200 meters," Chen whispered into his radio, scanning the surrounding buildings through his spotting scope. Multiple shooters in the second-floor windows. Sarah adjusted her position slightly, her movements economical and precise despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Through her rifle scope, she could see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different positions. Enemy fighters were firing down at the trapped convoy from elevated positions, using the high ground to devastating effect. The convoy commander's voice crackled through their radio. "Overwatch, we're pinned down and taking heavy casualties. Need immediate fire support on those elevated positions." Sarah's training kicked in automatically. Her grandfather's lessons about breathing and mental control, combined with 4 years of intensive military instruction, had created a marksman capable of performing under the most extreme conditions. She identified the first target, a fighter with an RPG positioned to destroy the lead convoy vehicle. "Target acquired," she reported calmly. "RPG gunner, second floor, third window from the left." Her first shot traveled across 200 meters of urban chaos and found its mark with surgical precision. The RPG gunner dropped immediately, his weapon falling from the window to crash on the street below. 1 threat eliminated, 11 more to go. "Confirmed kill," Chen reported. "Moving to next target." What happened over the next 8 minutes would become legendary within special operations circles. Sarah systematically engaged each enemy position with methodical precision, her shots guided by years of training and an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under pressure. Each target fell with a single shot, despite the confusion of battle raging around them. "Sniper, third building rooftop," Chen called out, identifying a particularly dangerous threat. The enemy marksman had already wounded 2 soldiers in the convoy and was positioning for another shot. Sarah shifted her aim to the distant rooftop, calculating wind speed, distance, and the slight downward angle required for the shot. At nearly 400 meters with smoke and dust obscuring her vision, this would be one of the most challenging shots of her career. She controlled her breathing exactly as her grandfather had taught her years ago, finding that moment of perfect stillness between heartbeats. The shot broke cleanly and the enemy sniper disappeared from view. "Target down," Chen confirmed. "That's number 8. As Sarah continued engaging targets, word of her performance spread through the radio network. Other units in the area could hear the constant reports of confirmed kills, each one delivered in the same calm, professional tone that had become her trademark. The convoy commander, Major Robert Harrison, had initially been skeptical when he learned his Overwatch support would be provided by a female sniper. His doubts had been completely erased as he watched Sarah systematically dismantle the ambush that had threatened to destroy his entire unit. "I don't know who that sniper is," he radioed to his headquarters, "but she just saved our entire convoy." 12 confirmed kills in under 10 minutes, all precision shots at extended range. By the time reinforcements arrived to secure the area, the ambush had been completely neutralized. Sarah had eliminated every enemy fighter who had posed a threat to the convoy, allowing the trapped soldiers to reorganize and continue their mission. As the unit regrouped, Major Harrison approached Sarah's position personally. He had commanded troops in combat for over 15 years, but he had rarely witnessed such a dominant display of marksmanship under extreme pressure. "Sergeant Martinez," he said, extending his hand. "That was the finest example of precision shooting I've ever witnessed in combat. Your actions today saved lives and completed the mission." Sarah accepted the handshake with characteristic humility. "Just doing my job, sir. Glad everyone made it through safely." But Major Harrison wasn't finished. "Sergeant, I've been in the Army for 20 years, and I've worked with some exceptional marksmen. What you did today was beyond exceptional. It was legendary." Word of Sarah's performance reached higher headquarters within hours. The after-action report detailed how a single sniper had neutralized an entire enemy squad, allowing a trapped convoy to escape what could have been a devastating ambush. The precision and speed of her shooting had prevented numerous casualties and turned a potential disaster into a tactical victory. 3 weeks later, Sarah received orders to report to the base commander's office. Colonel Patricia Williams, the first female officer to command a special operations base in Afghanistan, had requested the meeting personally. "Sergeant Martinez," Colonel Williams began, "I've reviewed the reports from your recent engagement. 12 confirmed kills, all precision shots, 0 civilian casualties, Mission accomplished with minimal friendly casualties. That's the kind of performance that defines elite soldiers. Sarah stood at attention, unsure where the conversation was heading. More importantly, the colonel continued, you've proven something that needed proving. When certain people claimed women couldn't handle the physical and mental demands of precision shooting in combat, you've provided a definitive answer. The colonel walked to her window, looking out at the base where soldiers from dozens of different units trained and prepared for missions. Do you remember why you joined the military, Sergeant? To serve my country and prove that skill matters more than prejudice, ma'am. Colonel Williams smiled. Mission accomplished on both counts. Your performance has been noted at the highest levels of command. There are opportunities ahead for soldiers with your capabilities. As Sarah left the colonel's office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From that confrontational day at a Texas shooting range to this recognition in a combat zone, she had proven every doubter wrong while staying true to the values her grandfather had instilled in her. That evening, she wrote a letter to Miguel Martinez describing the mission and the recognition she had received. But more importantly, she thanked him for the training and wisdom that had made everything possible. Abuelo, she wrote, you were right when you said real shooting was about more than hitting targets. Today I used everything you taught me to protect people who were counting on me. Jake Morrison said women don't belong behind a scope. I think 12 enemy fighters would disagree with him now. 6 months later, Sarah was promoted to staff sergeant and selected for the Army's most elite sniper school. Her combat performance had not only vindicated her grandfather's training methods, but had opened doors for other women seeking to serve in combat roles. The shy teenager who had been dismissed and insulted at a local shooting range had become one of the most respected marksmen in the United States military. But perhaps more importantly, she had proven that determination, proper training, and unwavering focus could overcome any obstacle, including the prejudices of people who thought they knew what she was capable of. Jake Morrison's dismissive words had inadvertently launched a journey that culminated in Sarah Martinez becoming exactly what he claimed was impossible. A woman who belonged behind a scope, protecting her fellow soldiers and serving her country with distinction in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The young woman who had silenced targets on a shooting range had grown into a warrior who silenced enemies in combat, proving, once and for all, that skill, courage, and dedication recognize no gender boundaries.